All right, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Rocky Mountain NetSuite user group. This is our agenda for today. We're gonna have our welcome and general business for about 15 or 20 minutes. And then we're also gonna have an opportunity for member announcements. At that point, I will ask you to unmute yourself. You can make announcements about job postings if you're looking for a job or anything in the NetSuite related ecosystem. You can announce it here. And then we're going to hear from our meeting sponsor today. Our meeting sponsor is Nolan Business Solutions. And then our main presentation is projects from 9 to 11, and that's going to be presented by Gerry Dewil and Omac from Oracle NetSuite. And then after that, we'll have a brief presentation on our 2023.1 update highlights, and then we'll have our open forum. So membership to our user group is free. You can register at RMNSUG.org. When you register, it ensures that you get a notification of the upcoming meetings and events. You also get access to our LinkedIn forum. And so if you're not a member, please go ahead and sign up. Where you can find us on our website, RMNSUG.org. We also have a YouTube channel, which is, you can just search for RMNSUG on YouTube or Rocky Mountain NetSuite user group. That should come up as well. And then we also have a LinkedIn user group, and that's the user group number there. It's kind of hard, probably not going to remember that, but you can just go to LinkedIn and do a search for Rocky Mountain NetSuite user group, and you should be able to find us that way. And I'll talk about that here in just a minute, our LinkedIn forum. So I just want to show you real quick, we do record and post all of our meetings to our website. Our website is, again, rmnsug.org/posts to see all of our previous posts. And I'm just going to switch over to our website real quick so that I can show you a little bit about what that looks like. If Mike or Dana, could you confirm, can you see my web browser screen? Okay.
Yes, on the front page.
Okay, great. So on our website, we have our posts, and you can just click on the post page here. And then if you want to search for any topic, you can use this search box right over here. So let's say, for example, you wanted to see some content on saved searches. You can just do a click for or a search for saved searches. And you'll see that we've done many meetings on saved searches in the past. We have some tips and tricks. We have full meetings. So you can go in and find a ton of content. We've been recording and posting our meetings for many years now. So all of the content is there and available. I will also show you quickly our Rocky Mountain NetSuite user group LinkedIn forum. So here's our LinkedIn forum. It is a closed forum. And so we do that, we keep it that way so that it doesn't get spammy. We want the content here to be relevant to all of our users. So if you're not a part of the forum, first of all, need to be a member of our user group. Again, that's free. Just sign up on our website, and then you can apply to the user group forum, and then you can post questions or answer other people's questions, or post member announcements and things like that on our user group forum here. Okay, go back here. All right. So we just recently had our happy hour in April. It was, I think, a great success. We did it at Hacienda, Colorado / Uncle Julio's. Still not clear on what the actual name of the place is, but it was a great event. Really nice venue. The food, I heard the food was really great. I got great feedback from everybody. We are planning another happy hour coming up in Q3. We're going to try and do this probably once a quarter. We may only get 3 this year, but we're going to keep doing this. I think it's really good for everybody to get together and network and meet some other people in the local Denver area in the NetSuite ecosphere. All right, I'm going to take a minute here and I'll pause. I'll let anybody unmute themselves. If you have any announcements, you can talk about any job openings that your company might have, or if you're looking for a NetSuite related job or anything like that. I'll go ahead and pause for a minute. If you don't want to announce it, you can put it in the chat window and I will read it for you. You can also just post it in our LinkedIn forum. So I'll just pause for a minute. Any announcements from anybody? Certainly there's somebody looking for some NetSuite talent out there. Okay. Well, going once. If nobody has any announcements, going twice. All right, I'll go ahead and move on then. If you think of something later on, feel free to post it in the meeting chat window. You can also go to the LinkedIn forum and post it there. Oh, we do have a couple. All right, so hi everyone, my name is Kyle with Systems Accountants. If anyone is looking for new roles, please feel free to contact me on LinkedIn, Kyle Pulliam, that's in the chat window. And Mike at AWWA says we're staffed up, stay tuned for a couple months. So lots of opportunities coming up. All right, we'll go ahead and move on. So I'm going to just take a quick minute to introduce the board of directors for the Rocky Mountain NetSuite user group. We are all volunteers. We do this, manage and run this group in our spare time. So first of all, that's me in the upper left-hand corner, Corey Anderson. I'm an independent NetSuite consultant. Then we have our membership and sponsorship chair, Margie Caminos of PlantScan Corporation. Then we have our communications chair, Mike Keckline of Vertifor. Our speaker chair, Peggy Evleth of RSM US. And then our treasurer, Dana Larson of Dana Larson Consulting. Just take a minute to thank everybody on the board. Thank you for continuing to help support the user group and help it keep running year after year. So evaluations, we do send out an evaluation. It is sent the same day as the meeting. So please take a few moments to let us know how we're doing. We do read and act on the feedback from those evaluations. One of the most important pieces of information we get from the evaluations are meeting topic ideas. We do have a rotating schedule of topics that we do on a recurring basis, but we have a couple of slots in our schedule for different content. And so if you have any ideas for meeting content or anything that you'd like to see, please put that in the evaluations that we send to you. And as a reminder, please use the same email to RSVP as the email that you received the meeting invite. We try to maintain individual member records. We do have a production NetSuite account that we use to manage the user group. So we try to minimize our duplicate customers or duplicate members. So if you received an invite to the meeting with different email addresses, maybe a work email and a personal email, please email rsvp@rmnsug.org to have the extra email addresses inactivated, or we can merge your member records in the system as well. And then please provide the correct company name and which email should be inactivated or merged. Talk a little bit about our meeting sponsorship. So membership to the user group is free, but the cost of our meetings is supported by 2 levels of sponsorship. We have SuiteApp and consulting sponsorship slots available for each meeting. Our SuiteApp sponsors must be available through suiteapp.com, and our consulting sponsors must offer NetSuite consulting services and have certified NetSuite consultants on staff. If you or your company are interested in sponsoring a meeting, you can learn more and sign up for either sponsorship type at rmnsug.org/sponsorship. Everything you need to know should be there. So our upcoming meetings, we have July 2023. This is a meeting that we do every other year. That'll be our accounting spotlight. Then in September this year, we're going to have an inventory potpourri. So that'll be kind of a mishmash of inventory topics, not necessarily just one big long presentation, but we'll have several different topics in there. And inventory is always a very popular one for us. In November, we're going to do Cash 360 plus other cash related topics. So the Cash 360 SuiteApp, I believe, is available now, and we're gonna highlight that and talk about that and what that looks like. We have done a cash-related topics meeting in the past, and that was a little bit of a potpourri as well. So we're gonna do Cash 360 plus some other cash-related topics at that time. And then in January, every January, we do a Suite Analytics meeting. So Suite Analytics includes save searches, Suite Analytics workbooks. And then at some point, we'll probably do something on the NetSuite Analytics warehouse, but we're going to do most likely the Suite Analytics workbooks topic this coming next January. I know that seems like a long ways away, but it's right around the corner for us. So that's our upcoming meeting schedule. So I'm just going to take a minute to say thank you to our SuiteApp sponsor for today, Nolan Business Solutions. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Carol Darcy from Nolan, and I will stop sharing. So Carol, if you're ready, we can go ahead and get you going here.
Yes, sorry, I was talking to myself. That's not good, is it?
No problem. Can hear you now.
All right, let me share my screen. Thanks, Corey. Perfect.
Looks good.
Looks good. Awesome. Great. So
okay, you're good.
Is it good now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Cool. So thanks for the opportunity to just talk a little bit about Nolan Business Solution. We'll keep it short because I know you guys got great content coming with the project management piece. So we've been around and you might have heard from us before. So if you have, you'll already be aware that we have a couple NetSuite native suite apps. I'd like to give a little bit of history around that. We've been in the NetSuite community for a very long time, and actually our initial development efforts started with developing a fixed asset module for NetSuite, because believe it or not, there wasn't one in the initial configuration. So we developed the module, and then NetSuite, instead of developing that on their own, decided to looked at our module and felt that it was very well developed, solid, well integrated with the rest of the NetSuite processes, so acquired it from us in 2011. So yeah, to me, that little tidbit of history really speaks to the quality of our development and our adherence to the development standards of NetSuite. Then we decided that although NetSuite had good cash management capabilities with its own bank reconciliation module and electronic payment, some enhanced features could be provided, hence the development of those two modules. As a side note, not only can we implement those suite apps, but we also obviously over the years have developed an expertise around cash management, especially for organizations in the retail or e-commerce online business. I'll talk about that briefly on when I just highlight the features of our bank rec. So that's a little bit of our consulting expertise that we've developed in that area, and then some additional expertise we got in the healthcare management, NetSuite project management, and optimization and management services. We're here to talk about our product solutions. So at a high level, we have two main suite apps that are all around cash management, help you automate your cash processes, starting with our advanced bank reconciliation module that helps automatically reconcile banking activity, not only for bank transactions, but also merchant gateways and corporate credit cards. We also have our electronic payment module that will help you electronically pay your vendor bills and employee expense reports, along with a platform called Nolan Cloud Services that you can identify as a bit of an integration agent between NetSuite and your banks. So on our Nolan Cloud Services platform, we have two specific modules for the NetSuite community. In our Nolan Bank Feed that helps automate the upload of the bank data from your bank into our ABR Suite app for the purpose of bank reconciliation. And then we also have recently launched our Payments Direct that allows kind of the integration the other way around, which is taking electronic payment files and pushing them electronically to your bank. So essentially our Nolan Cloud Services platform offers you that two-way reliable integration between NetSuite and your banks. I often get the question, okay, well, that's great, but that functionality already exists in NetSuite, so why Nolan? So I'm just going to spend a couple minutes here highlighting why our apps are different than what's available in NetSuite. And then right after this slide, I will be inviting you to join a webinar where we're actually going to demonstrate the features that we're talking about today. So get your phones ready because there's a little QR code that you can quickly scan if you want to just register quickly from your phone, but also post a link in the chat right after. So why Nolan's bank reconciliation? The enhanced features that we provide there, obviously our automated bank data feed is reliable in that it has also multiple options. Not only can we do SFTP connections, but also API connections to various bank. We also support open banking for a lot of European banks, as well as some of the common US banks. So all of our clients really like how our bank feed doesn't require a lot of maintenance. Once the credentials are entered, they are reliable and don't need to be re-entered often. And we're all about automation. So when you're thinking about our tool, it's all about, if you find yourself with your current status, telling yourself, man, I wish that, you know, my bank data feed was a little bit more automated. I didn't have to constantly re-enter these credentials. If you find yourself saying, well, I wish that we could auto reconcile a much higher percentage of the data. So with our complex matching rules and our auto post capabilities that includes advanced intercompany journals, matching rules that includes groupings. So if you find yourself manually clicking and manually reconciling the GL data to your bank, what we've been able to accomplish with all our clients is clients that have gone from anywhere of reconciling 50% of their data to 90% being automatically reconciled. So as I said, we're just all about process automation. So that's the key message here is if you find yourself or you hear your staff saying, man, I wish this bank rec was a lot more automated, maybe it's time to look at Nolan Advanced Bank Reconciliation with Nolan Bank Feeds. On the electronic payment side, you know, we got a lot of flexibility with the configurable file formats. We've got some out-of-the-box features that don't have to be programmed or customized, such as support for multiple vendor bank details, bank detail approval, bill payment approval, automation again, automated email remittance. And certainly our team over the years has developed an unmatched expertise with international payment requirements. So the differentiator here too, to highlight, is that it's one thing to say that we support international payments, but international payments often means in the NetSuite environment domestically. So supporting domestic payments in Switzerland or in the UK or in France. But when we talk about cross-border payments, now we're going US to European countries and US to Asian countries. That's where the Nolan team has, over the years, like I said, developed really, really good expertise and can really smooth out the process of implementing those types of payments. And the electronic transmission to the bank is something that customers have been really grateful to kind of eliminate that manual step of generating a file in NetSuite and then having to manually upload it to your bank. So if you'd like to hear more and kind of see these features in action, we've set up a webinar specifically for this group on June 1st, where I'm going to go into each of these features into a lot more detail and actually demonstrate right in NetSuite how they work. So feel free to scan the QR code here to register, or like I said, I'm going to post a link here in the chat in a moment. And don't forget about our raffle. We got a couple gift cards for your group today. So I will be posting that in the chat as well. Thanks, Corey.
Thank you so much, Carol, and thank you again for sponsoring the user group. And then, yeah, so everybody make sure that you enter the raffle. $200 Amazon gift cards being given away today. And I'll post that again a little bit later on, Carol, as well, just to remind everybody if they haven't done it. All right, so we're a little bit ahead of schedule today, but we'll go ahead and jump into the main content. So Gerry and Ali, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you guys.
Excellent. Thank you, Corey. We'll gladly take the extra time.
All right.
Thank you, Carol and Nolan Business Solutions for sponsoring, and good morning, everyone. Ali and I are co-workers. We both work for NetSuite demo organization. So we build the demo accounts for our solution consultants. And as you can imagine, the solution consultants cover various industries. So our team too is split up in different industries. If I go to the next slide here. I focus on manufacturing and food and beverage. Prior to this role, so I've been with NetSuite 4.5 years now. Prior to this role, I was with JD Edwards. And before that, I was with EBS, Demantra, and some other Oracle Cloud products that we know now. I've worked on Service Cloud and Oracle Transportation Management. So all in all, 20 years with Oracle. I am located in Evergreen, which if I go out to the Rocky Mountain NetSuite page, I'm somewhere out here. That's where I'm located at. This is Mount Evans. So Evergreen is west of Denver, and Ali is all the way across the pond in the UK. So why don't you introduce yourself, Ali?
Hello, everyone. I'm Ali. I just want to first of all say thank you for having us. We're very excited about this presentation. A bit about myself. I'm a solutions specialist at NetSuite, focusing on software and services verticals. I've been with NetSuite for about 3.5 years. And prior to NetSuite, I was a field-based professional services consultant for one of our competitors, so a UK-based ERP software provider. And I'm based in London, UK. We have included our email addresses on this slide as well. So if you've got any questions or any follow-up questions after this presentation, feel free to drop us an email.
Thanks, Ali. And yeah, maybe one house rule there. It is a large topic to cover. We have a lot of content to go through. So Ali will be monitoring the chat when I'm speaking and vice versa. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And then at the end, we should have ample time to have a Q&A session as well. That being said, let's go ahead and look at the agenda here. This is a pretty standard agenda, but with project management utilizing a variety of visual tools, we figured we're going to put the agenda in a visual format as well. So I will be covering box number 1 and 2, meaning the project offerings. There's lots of different flavors and additions. The account configurations, what does it take to enable project management? And then some administrative stuff. What does it take to set up the basic features to get going? So I'll be talking about billing classes and rate cards, work calendars, project resource setup. And then Ali is going to walk through the actual project, how you initiate it, how you allocate resources, how you monitor tasks, project billing, etc. And then in the end, I'm going to come back and talk about various SuiteApps. SuiteApps, that's the way that we complement the product these days. It's not so much bundles anymore. It's all SuiteApps. SuiteApps are built on something called Suite Cloud Development Framework. So they have a different platform underneath it or technology. So I'll be talking about a few SuiteApps at the end of the presentation. Now let's start off with some common project terminology. I'm not going to read through all of them. We have probably a very diverse audience here, so some of you may know some of these terms, others may not know any of them. This is a kind of a placeholder in case we need to come back to it to discuss any of these topics. But the first one is something that I do want to mention: Service Resource Planning, SRP. It's an outdated term. We no longer use that. It is now SuiteProjects. And I'll go into that in a moment, what exactly SuiteProjects is. Some other terminology out here: activity codes, critical path, resource management. Ali will be talking about most of those in the system and actually demonstrate some of these features. And then we have also generic resources here, the last one, that's one that he will talk about. And then in our Project 360 SuiteApp, we look at the field called estimate at completion. So these are just terms in case we need to come back to them. But at a very high level, a project management flow involves many different stakeholders. Someone at some point is going to define the project. That could be a project manager, it could be a resource manager, financial controller. They all might have some input, and they're going to staff the project. But then the people on the ground, the middle box here, the employee center, they are going to be logging expense reports, they're logging time, and they might have project purchases. So once these transactions are approved, then we look at our billing strategies and we're going to build a customer. That's at a very high level what's happening. Now, let's take a look at the various offerings that we have for project management. So we have basic projects, project management, and suite projects. Basic projects, as you can see here, you can log time against the project, but it's part of your customer record. You can enter percent complete, and you can use your CRM functionality to track all that information. But project management is much more powerful, and it includes tasks, milestones. We can have templates, a project dashboard, utilization, profitability reporting, and then also charge-based billing. But the most popular or the most frequently installed and implemented product is SuiteProjects, because it also includes resource allocation and job costing. So to sum it up, SuiteProjects consist of project management, resource management, and project costing. So let's go take a look at that in the system, and I'm going to bring up a starter account. So as you can imagine, various customers have various implementations, and the smallest account is a starter account with fairly minimal features. So when we go to setup company and we go to the enable section, enable features, under company, there's a projects tab. You can enable that, and this is now going to allow you to track projects independently from your customers' activities. So what that means is when I go out here and I go take a look at my customers, that's what I want to do here. I go to my next list here. Here I have an example of a customer that has 2 projects. So you see that it's a sub-record of that customer. Now I can go look at that customer, and when that record opens up under my sales portlet here, I have a section for projects. So I can see what kind of projects are tied to this customer. When I open one of these records, the information is fairly minimal. We have a start date. We have a percent complete that we can populate, and we have an estimated cost and an estimated revenue. Now you can start this from your customer record. You can simply go out here and say, I'm going to create a project for this customer. And we can also log time against that project. So here's an example of a timesheet where it is tied to that particular project. Okay, so out here we see that this is project 10-1. Now let me switch over to a different account, and Ali is going to be using that account for the most part. And this account has SuiteProjects in it. So when I bring up a project, you will see that the record is going to look very different. In this account, we would have all the bells and whistles turned on. So Ali is going to walk through this record and walk you through all the different sections in it. But you can see at a very high level that we go much more detailed when you have SuiteProjects. So we have schedules, we have our resources out here, we have project indicators, we have a work breakdown structure. So Ali will spend most of his time explaining all of these features. Now, when we go to that same navigation, enable features, you will see that that same project section contains a lot more information. So let's go take a look at some of these projects. That's the one that I showed you in the starter account. Then we have project management here. We're going to talk about all of these here. So project management, that allows you to identify tasks for each step required. It also tracks resources that are contributing to a project completion. You can track expenditures. You can track the percentage of progress towards project completion. And you can bill customers when milestone tasks are completed. In terms of plant work, oops. I just closed up my browser. Apologies for that. Like I did. 1 second. So I'm in the right account. Let's go back to enable features. And we were talking about plant work. So out here for plant work, that allows you to track projects by creating a fixed project plan and then compare that to the actual versus the plant work for that project. Then we have job costing and project budgeting. Job costing, that allows you to associate costs with project labor and account for those costs in your general ledger. And then as far as project budgeting goes, that allows you to set budgets at the project level and the task level for costs and billings. So then that information, of course, is available in reports, and that allows you to compare your budget and your true project financials. Then we have advanced project profitability. That allows you to track your profitability based on accounts and items. You can create custom configurations to tailor for your project profitability. Then we have activity codes that allows you to classify transactions across projects and customers when you're using advanced project budgets. So these two go hand in hand. So for advanced project budgets, that allows you to create custom hierarchical structures for tracking project expenses. And then we have a suite app here called the Project Task Manager. Ollie will be showing that one as well. That's a graphical user interface that shows all the project resources and tasks in one place. And it allows you to make sure that those tasks are staffed and get a real-time view in your NetSuite account of your resources available. Another section here under the company subtab is resource management. For resource allocations, that allows you to manage resources, so people and vendors, and allocate those with durations. It comes with a resource manager role, and you can also use utilization rates on the employee record that goes hand in hand with that allocation. Then we have a couple suite apps here, resource allocation chart. Ollie will be showing that one as well. That again allows you to visually manage the resource allocations from one chart. And it goes hand in hand with or you can supplement with the resource skills set, where you can define your resources, their skills, their expertise, their experience, and then tie that back to the resource allocation chart when you're looking for the right resources. The other section that we need to consider is under the transactions. If we scroll down a little bit, past sales, past shipping, there's a billing section. So for the billing section, not all of them apply just to projects, but bill cost to customers and advanced billing, they certainly do apply to it. So for bill cost to customers, it's what you would think it does. So you bill your expenses for time, goods, and services directly to your customers. You have to have the advanced receivables feature for this. Then you have advanced billing that allows you to create billing schedules to invoice sales over a range of time or a contract term. So for instance, a 1-year membership that you bill monthly. And then we have charge-based billing. And that allows you to create billable charges for these projects. These charges are calculated according to some rules. And these rules can be based on fixed dates, project progress, it can be milestones, can be based on expenses, or on simple time entries. Then the last section, so these don't necessarily apply to projects. The last section under the enable features is when we go to the employees. We have to think about how we're going to account for their time. So there's a section that talks about time and expenses. The first or so expense reports, that's pretty explanatory, self-explanatory. We have approval routing. Then we have pre-employee billing rates. You check this when you want to create billing classes. That kind of goes together with the next checkbox billing rate cards. So those billing classes, they set aside billable time rates when different employees charge different rates for the same service. So if you associate a billing class with an employee and you set rates for that billing class on a service item, then the proper rate defaults to bill the customer on time tracking. So the billing rate cards, we'll show that in the system in a moment. So that's again to define different rates for groups of billing classes. And then let's see. That would be it for the setup for the enable features. So when I go back to our presentation, let's take a look at some of these billing classes and the work calendars and the project resource. And once you have those defined, then you're ready to go into an actual project record. So when we are in the system, what we want to do is, actually, I want to cover this here on the slide first before we go there. So here's an overview of a billing class. When different employees charge different rates for the same service, that's when you can create that billing class and you assign those billing classes to the employees. You can also set that at the service item record. And you can create these billing classes for individual employees, or you can apply it to a group of employees. When you use billing classes, it requires 4 different steps. So first you're going to enable the feature, then you're going to create the billing class, then you're going to specify the billing class on the employee record, and then you can track the billing class pricing on the service item as well. Now we can have rate cards where we say for customer A, this billing class might apply, but I'm charging a different rate for my consultant for customer A as compared to customer B. This B, you've been working with a particular customer numerous times and you give them a discount on certain roles, not all of them. So this is when you can use those rate cards. Then we have work calendars. You create these calendars to track and manage the work capacity for employees, but also vendors, because vendors can be resources on your project. So knowing the work capacity for each employee, that helps you then schedule those resources. And that applies again to the vendor as well. And there's no limit on how many work calendars you can create. You can have a one-to-one relationship, one calendar for each employee, or you can have a shared calendar. You can also have, for instance, a calendar for the US that includes some non-working days, which is different from a calendar for, let's say, Canadian resources. Then the last thing we have in terms of setup is our project resource setup. The people that you assign and use as labor on a project, those are considered your project resources. These resources can be just your employees, but also vendors. You have to label them as a project resource. You cannot go into the system and pull any employee into a project. They have to be labeled as a project resource. And within that project resource, we can then define, is this just a contributor or is this a project manager? But we can also, if we don't know for sure who we're going to put on the project, we can define generic resources. Generic resources are placeholders. So you can put some resource on the project and do some capacity planning. And then you can move those generic resources to specific resource. Resource groups, they enable you to create a group of resources to be assigned together to a single project. For example, if you have a group of engineers that typically works on a task together, you can create a resource group for those engineers. Let's go take a look at some of these features. In terms of navigation, I'm going to go to Setup Accounting, and here are my billing classes and my billing rates. So I'm going to open those two. And under the billing class, you can see that we have some different classes here for business analyst, consultant, project manager, etc. When I open this, we will actually see that these are tied to some rate cards. So if I open up my second tab here, where we look at the billing rate cards, we can see we have billing rate cards that are specific to customers, for instance, or maybe I want to see what's my daily billing rate card. So here we see the pricing broken down for the in the different currencies. And then when we go back to the other screen here and we look at the billing rate cards, we can see for this particular class, we have these different customers or rate cards out there. That's where you define the billing classes and billing cards. Now let's take a look at work calendars. So that would be under list employees. We have work calendars. And we can have a default calendar. We can have a consulting calendar. You define whatever you need. Maybe we have some developers out in India and they work off hours during our regular business hours, so we can define a day in our system, start at 1 a.m. and have different dates, for instance. You can have, there's another example here, we can have weekend resources. Maybe we send some development work or project management work overseas over the weekend, and we have a different calendar there. So you can apply then these calendars to different resources. And that's what we'll do. We'll go take a look at an employee who is a consultant, and a few things on the employee record there. First of all, we see that Abby belongs to the Department of Consulting. She is labeled as a project resource. When I go look at the billing class, she belongs to the consultant billing class. And when I go to my human resources sub-tab, we can see here that she's not a project manager. So I cannot assign a project to her as a manager, but we are utilizing her at a utilization rate of 100%. And then here we see that the calendar, it's just a standard calendar for her 5 days a week, 8 hours. Then let's take a quick look at generic resources. So when we go to list employees, and we go to our generic resources and resource groups. I think I opened the first one. So we have two groups, consultants, technical consultants. We see on the right hand side here that 6 members, and then this will show us the employees that belong to that group and their cost, their supervisor, the class, etc. As far as generic resources goes, this is like, again, if that's a placeholder on our project, we can do this by subsidiary. So here we have some UKs, the Netherlands, and here's the cost and the price. Then the last thing I wanted to show is what if you use a vendor as a resource. So I can open up the vendor record here, and there's just a simple checkbox. Use this project as a vendor, or this vendor as a project vendor. And then the other thing you can do there under the financial tab, I believe, is you can also set the vendor as a project resource. So now that we know some of the setup, I'm going to pass it over to Ali, who is going to talk about the activities. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you for that, Gary. That was a great overview. Okay, so I'll get the slide deck ready and then share my screen. Okay, and hide some meeting controls, and then we should be good to go.
And Ollie, we're 25 minutes in, so I'll let you know in about roughly 35 minutes when we can take a break. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. Can you see my slide deck?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Okay, so we are going to cover a lot in the next hour or so, and obviously we'll have a break in between, as there are lots of activities that happen within a project So I hope each and every one of you will go with some useful takeaways from today. And I also appreciate that some of you will be familiar with what I'm going to show you today. But I'm sure we have colleagues in the audience who are probably new to NetSuite projects, or maybe have never used NetSuite projects and might be interested in the basics around NetSuite projects. If you feel like we need to do a deep dive into a certain process area, perhaps we can organize a follow-up session for that. I mean, project budgeting, for example, that's quite a big one. I mean, we could easily probably spend an hour just on that topic. But what we are gonna do today is show you a flavor of project budgeting on a typical project. I will be using my UK-based data set, which might have some UK wording or terminology as well. So I thought I'll throw that in there as well. So yes, we are going to have a look at a lot. So first of all, we're going to start off with project overview. With project overview, what we are going to cover is we're going to look at some of the project preferences that are available to us. We will then have a look at the project billing setup, project revenue recognition setup options, and project budgeting. So what I'll do is I'll switch over to my system. Just checking that you can still see my demo account.
Yes, all good, Alan.
Perfect. Okay, so we are going to start with reviewing a typical project record in NetSuite. And as I said, as we go through, we'll delve into certain process areas on that project. So before we look at an existing project, I want to quickly highlight the options you have for creating a new project in NetSuite. So the first way of creating a project in NetSuite is via an opportunity record. So if your organization or business is using opportunities, you can create projects directly through an opportunity record. So let me just bring up an example opportunity record on screen. So after we allocate an opportunity record, this is an example opportunity form within NetSuite. What we have on top of the page is a field called project. When we hover over to that field, you can click on the new button to create a new project. What that will do is bring up a pop-up with various project-related fields, which you can fill in and create your project. And then once it is created from here and the opportunity is saved, the opportunity and project will both be linked to each other. And you can see the details of the project or the opportunity via the related records tab. The next way of creating a project, which is the most common method, is via project templates. Now, using project templates can save a lot of time when creating a new project. Let's just have a look at some of the project templates in this demo account. So in here, we've got a list of all of our project templates. So these are templates that were created for work maybe we're carrying out repetitively. And if I open one of these templates, on a template, you can specify some general information about that template. You can also specify the project plan, and creating these project plans can be time consuming. So having all of this information along with the preferences, you can simply click on create project button from here, specify a project name and then a customer, and that will then go away and create you a project with all the information that you have entered in a project template. As I said, this can save you a lot of time when creating new projects. The other method is you can create projects from scratch by using the quick links. So if you've added projects as one of your preferences, you can create projects directly through the quick links as well. And lastly, you can create projects from sales items. So this can be very useful if you're selling a particular service item in high volume. Let me show you an example of a service item. So assuming you are selling the IT installation service item in your business, and every time you include the IT installation item in one of your sales transactions, whether that's an opportunity or a sales order, the system can then go and create the project for you automatically. So under the related records tab on a service item, we have a sub-tab called projects. Clicking on projects will give us a checkbox which enables us to create a project if this service item is ever used in any of the sales transactions. We can then specify the project template which can then be used in terms of creating the project. What will happen is then there is a page called Create Projects from Sales Transactions page. Let me just open up that page. This page the way I imagine this page is like a monitoring page where it monitors the sales transactions. And as soon as it identifies an item that has the Create Project checkbox checked, it will highlight and say, right, these are the projects that I think you should be creating as part of your sales transactions. From here, you can simply select the projects that you want to create and click on Submit, which will go away and create the projects with the associated templates, default templates on the sales transactions. So all of these options will enable you to create a project record, and some of them just mean that you'll have to enter less information, and the others will just mean you'll have to maybe start from scratch. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my roles now and switch over to my project manager role, and we'll have a look at a typical client billable project in this demo set. So we have already created this project in the system, and we're just going to cover what's available to us on this typical project record. So at the top of the page, we have the project code and the client name. We also have set baseline button. So what the set baseline button does is it captures the complete original project, including all the intended tasks and costs for the schedule. What will then happen is the baseline can then become your point of reference for the project. It was used quite a lot in the past, not so much these days, as the advanced project budgets has a lot more flexibility around this, which we'll cover in a moment. Create template button is if you wanted to create a template from this existing project. So what the system will do is take all the information you have entered on this particular project that we're looking at, and it will add the project to your list of templates, just so you can save time if you need to create a similar project in future. Okay, under the primary information section, we have the main project details such as the job ID, the name of the project, the customer, status, project manager, and project type. In the midsection, we have the project overview, which has some calculated fields such as the planned work. How many hours have we planned on this project? Actual work. How many hours of actual work, i.e. timesheets, have been submitted against the for this project? So these are all automatically calculated fields. And as transactions are entered, the system will increment these values. And it has useful information such as, well, what's our % work complete? So this shows how much work is complete on this project. We also have some risk-related fields, which are part of our project risk forecast bundle. And what that allows you to do is specify risk levels and risk details on a given project. And then there are reports you can run, which will show the projects and their risk details. And finally, on the right-hand side, I've got some custom fields that I have added to this project record. As you guys are probably aware, custom fields are very easy to add in NetSuite. So I have just added a couple in here just for reporting purposes. On the project date section, we have the project start date. We also have the scheduling method. Now, the scheduling method we've set on this project is forward. What this means is this will enable you to plan tasks forward in time from the start date. And then NetSuite will automatically calculate the end date for you, like what we have over here. The other option you have for scheduling method in NetSuite projects is backwards, which means you can enable the plan, which enables you to plan tasks backward in time from the end date. And then NetSuite will automatically calculate the start date. And it's a personal preference as to which one you use. You might want to use the backward method, for example, if you've got a project that's got a deadline that's set in stone, cannot be moved. So you might want to plan your tasks backward from that deadline date. And under the classification section, this is where we have our project classifications. And these are part of our Project Classifications SuiteApp, which you can download from the SuiteApp marketplace and use. What it allows you to do is you can tag classifications such as department, class, and location on your project record. And then when someone enters a project-related transaction for this particular project, the transactions will automatically be tagged to these classifications rather than using any other defaults. Okay, in the subtabs section, we have various subtabs. I mean, there are lots of subtabs in this account. So these basically contain the details of your project preferences and your project plan. So what I want to do is I want to start off with the Preferences tab. So the Preferences tab is an important subtab that allows you to set various settings for your project. You must define these preferences for each project, but the good news is that once these are defined in your project templates, they do cascade down to your newly created projects. So let's have a look at some of the preferences we have in here. So we've got allow time and allow expenses. So these preferences simply tell the system you can allow time entry and expenses for this particular project. If these are unchecked, this project won't be available for time and expense entry. We also have various options like classify time as utilized, classify time as productive, and classify time as exempt. Now, these preferences determine how the project time is entered and is used in calculations for project utilization and productivity. Now, as this is a sample client project, we will leave it as classify time as utilized. We also have some time approval options. This is where we can select who can approve time entered on this project. Now, there are several options under this field, including approve time automatically, but NetSuite leading practice is to include the project manager in the approval chain in order to route all the time entered for this project for project manager's approval. Okay, let's cover some of the other tabs such as the relationships, communication, and related record. So under the relationships tab, this enables you to add any relevant contact details for this project. The communication tab enables you to track messages, activities, and attach files for this project. In this instance, we have attached our project plan to this project. So it's in one central place, and anyone who has access to this project can view these documents. Under the related records tab, this is a tab that displays any transaction that is associated with this project, such as the expense reports, or if we've got any purchase orders or invoices, we can have access to all of those directly through the related records. Under the financial tab, this is where we define and specify our billing type for this project. Now, there are various billing types. What we are going to cover today is what's called the charge-based billing. Charge-based billing method is the most popular option by far, as it caters for both simple and complex billing scenarios. The project expense type, the selected project expense type tells the NetSuite which account to debit when posting time transactions for job costing. When you enable job costing, two default project expense types are created. One is regular expense type, which I have renamed to regular client billable in this instance. That is mapped directly to direct labor GL account in your general ledger. The other default that you're giving is the overhead expense type, and that is mapped to indirect labor. You can update these project expense types or create new project expense types to reflect your company's current process. What you can also do is you can choose to add project expense types to your service items. So when a time transaction is posted with a particular service item, the expense on the service item will override the expense type that is set on the project, unless we have the apply all time entries checked, which will mean any timesheet that is entered in this project will post against the regular expense type, which is direct labor. Okay, in the charge summary section, this displays information about our project charges, which we're going to talk about a lot today. So in this section, we can see our bill charges, pending charges, remaining charges, but we will come back to this section later on as we cover project billing and charge-based rules in the system. Now, at the bottom of this financial subtab, we have various rules or tabs that allow us to create charge rules. Now, charge-based rules is an engine for processing various project activities and turning those into charges that can be included on project-related invoices. Let me bring up a diagram just to show how charge-based billing works in NetSuite. Okay, so the way charge-based billing works in NetSuite is we have various expenses that are entered on our project, such as approved timesheets, approved expenses. We might have what we call a fixed date rule. So a fixed date rule is we may have agreed with our client that we're going to bill them an X amount when their project goes live. Or when a milestone is completed, we are going to bill them an X amount. So all of these are type of charges, including project progress achieved. So when one of those transactions are entered against or for our project, what happens is we have an engine called charge-based billing engine, where it allows you to create certain rules and tells the system how these transactions should be calculated and to be invoiced to our customers. Now, I absolutely love this feature. I mean, if you were to ask me what's the most powerful feature of NetSuite Projects, I would definitely say charge-based billing. And the reason for that is the previous products that I have used, we used to have to actually code these rules. And when I mean code, we used to, in one of the products that I've used, we used the SQL management server, where we went in and actually entered lines and lines of codes for actually creating this engine and to work out how much we should actually charge for these expenses. So let's go back into NetSuite now and see how these are created. So let's review time-based rules as an example. So in here, we have two rules, and you can have as many rules as you wish. Depending on the complexity of your billing, you can have lots of rules in here, or even just one time-based rule. And in this example here, we've got two rules, and there is a rule order. So what the engine is going to do is it's going to evaluate the first rule, and after evaluating the first rule, it will then evaluate the second rule if it needs to be. So let's just quickly have a look at the first rule that we have for timesheets. So what we are seeing is we've got the time-based rule, an example time-based rule. We've got the name of the time-based rule, and we've specified a rule order as well. Now, in terms of the settings, we have told the system, well, if a time is entered in this project, we want to use a billing rate card to work out how much we want to bill for the time. And in this instance, we have what we call CloudWorks default, CloudWorks being the client in this example. So we have told the system, when a timesheet is entered in this data set or against this project, we want you to use the CloudWorks default rate card to work out how much we need to invoice our customers. This is where it gets a little bit more interesting. So what we can also say is, well, we want to add a cap type. So we have agreed with our customer that this project is going to take 256 hours to complete. So we told this rule that we want you to use the default rate for the first 256 hours. Now let's go and have a look at the second rule that we have down here. On the second rule, we've specified exactly the same details. We said we still want you to use the CloudWorks default rate card. But this time, we've also specified a rate multiplier, which indicates that we are going to give a 25% discount on additional hours on top of the 256 hours that we have agreed. You can also use the filters to create very specific charge rules for maybe specific items if you need to do so. So exactly the same rules are available for expenses as well. Let's just have a look at a very simple one over here. And in the expense rule, it's very similar to the time-based rule, where we've specified the name of this rule. There are some filters. So this is where we say employees have entered expense reports, but these are the ones that we're interested in evaluating and calculating how much we need to bill. And you can change these filters if need be. And also we've said we want to add a 20% markup by specifying 1.2 in the discount markup field. Perhaps that's because we're adding a 20% markup for our admin charges. Okay, and you can have some milestone rules, for instance. So if you can tell the system when the go live milestone is met, we want to bill $10,000, for example. So they are very easy to create, and they can be very simple or very complex as well. And lastly, we have the Project Revenue Rules tab under the Financials tab. If we have a look at the Project Revenue Rules, so the Project Revenue Recognition feature enables you to defer revenue for charge-based projects using the Advanced Revenue Management module without you having to generate sales orders. So you don't have to tag your projects to sales orders. You can do your revenue recognition directly off the back of a project. The type of revenue rules, project revenue rules that are available to us are as charged. So as charged will recognize the revenue from actual project charges as they are created rather than when they're billed. These are ideal for time and materials projects that are billed in hourly or daily rates. Percent complete, you can use percent complete revenue rule for projects with a meaningful progress and in situations where you can define the completeness of your project. I mean, in the example that I've got here, I have charges that are worth $52,888. And by just using the percent complete rule, what that will do is it will write the values into the percent complete override tab. And in there, by just looking at the project plan, it will work out how much percent it needs to recognize in each period and the amounts that it is planning on recognizing in each period as well. You can, the NetSuite projects will allow you to edit the percent complete override and actually specify your own cumulative percent complete. We also have a new SuiteApp as part of our 23.1 release, which is called cost-to-cost percent complete SuiteApp, which is very powerful because the standard revenue percent complete rule, what it uses is it uses the actual time, it divides that actual time by the planned time to work out the percent complete, and then it uses that as the basis for recognizing revenue. With the new SuiteApp, what that allows you to do is it allows you to define the basis for your percent complete calculations, which Gary's going to cover in the SuiteApp section. And lastly, on revenue recognition, just to add that advanced revenue management module is required for project revenue rules. Okay, let's have a look at project budgeting now. Just going to switch over to my slide deck. Okay, today we're going to cover what's called advanced project budgets. I just want to make you aware that if you have the basic project budgets, it's very limited in that you only have one version. You can't have hierarchies, and all you're having to do is manually enter your budget values against 4 categories, which are labor, expense, supplier, and I believe the other one's called other. With advanced project budgets, you can assign estimated amounts to cost or revenue, and you can create detailed work breakdown structure by using activity codes. So you can have as many activity codes as you like, which will allow you to assign them to what we call work breakdown structure, which is something we're going to have a look at in a moment in the system. And the work breakdown structure allows you to use these activity codes and create a hierarchy of your budgets. And at any given time, you can have two active budget versions. One of them is called the baseline budget. The other one is called EAC budget, so estimate at complete budget. You can also have various other versions in between by using advanced project budgets, but at any given time, you can report against the baseline budget and the EAC budget. So let's go back into the system and take a look at the budgets in this example project. Okay, so first of all, advanced project budgets is split across two tabs in the project record. They are work breakdown structure and budget. Work breakdown structure is where you create and edit your budgets. So think of it as your work in progress page where you can actually make some changes to your budget. And the budget tab is a view only tab which displays your current budgets. So let's click on work breakdown structure. To save time, I am going to show you an existing work breakdown structure that I have already prepared, but let's click on edit just to see how it looks. So at the top of the page, we've got the primary information about this budget. So we've got the project and the description currently says second revision. In the middle section, we have the chart, and that will display our estimated costs and actual costs. You can also specify a target margin for reporting purposes. Down the bottom is where it gets interesting. So I'm just going to expand some of these. So under the lines tab, this is where we get to see our budget lines. Now, these individual lines are called budget lines, and they are assigned to what we call activity codes. Now, activity codes are used for classifying project time entries and transactions for use within advanced project budgets. And the reason we're using activity codes and not the project task is because activity codes are available for tagging to most transactions, unlike tasks, which are not available on some transactions such as invoices. So if we wanted to do our revenue budget, it won't be wise to use project task because project task is not a field or available field on an invoice transaction, but activity code is. So a couple of other details we have in here, such as we can immediately see our actuals for all of our project lines. We can also see estimate to complete. Estimate to complete is where we enter our budgets. Estimate at completion is estimate to complete plus our actuals. So at any given time, we have access to all of that information from here. Once you're happy with, let's just have a look at some of the budget entry options. So you can, it goes as far as you can simply just enter these figures manually if you wanted to do so on your budget lines and specify the number. What you could also do is you can get the system to calculate these for you. And those calculated fields are indicated by these padlocks. If we click on one of those padlocks, what we're saying here is, instead of us entering those figures manually, we want you to source those figures for us. And the sources we have available in the system are, we can get those figures, we can either enter them manually from our service items or project resources. So in this example, we've basically told the system, we want to source our figures from project resources. And we know we are going to utilize a UK consultant for that budget line. And all we're left to do with this to enter the hours under the ETC quantity. The system will then go away and have a look at the resource records and work out, based on those hours, how much the budget should be. So you can have calculated cells as well. And once you're ready, you can save this work breakdown structure. And as soon as when you're ready, you can either re-baseline or create a new forecast. And until you do that, it's a working copy. So you can pretty much save this as it is, come back 2 days later, make more changes, and only convert it to a budget when you're ready. Which brings me to my next point, which is where NetSuite maintains 2 budget versions at a given time for reporting purposes. Let's have a look at those. So I'm just going to go back to my project record. So under the budget tab, if we have a look at the budget history, this will show us all of our budget revisions. So this particular example project had 3 budget versions: the initial version, the first version, and second version. And as I said, at a given time, any one of those could be tagged as the baseline budget, i.e. maybe where you started from, and your EAC budget, which could be your latest forecast. Now, let's have a look at which report is then used after we fill in our budget details and assuming we have actual transactions coming in for this project. So we have a report under projects called Project Profitability Reports. And I'm just going to show you an example of one of those reports. And that report will basically show for each individual project, what's our baseline cost budget, what's our EAC cost budget, what's our actual costs, committed costs, and total costs. So all of that information is fed into this report, which you can run at any time, schedule it, email it, or print it. Okay, so going back to my project record, we're going to have a look.
We're coming up.
Awesome. Thank you, Corey. Okay, there was a question in the chat that I just want to quickly touch base on before we continue. I think the question was, does anyone know if this module can be used to capture costs associated with an internal project and then ultimately be capitalized? Okay, so what I'm going to do is start sharing my screen. I actually have an example of those projects, one of those projects in this data set, which is, funny enough, called Internal Capitalized Project. It does require a bit of configuration to set this up, but SuiteProjects definitely does support capitalizing costs. It does use fixed assets module to do the capitalization. And if you want to drop me an email, I can share a document with you which explains the configuration points as well. Okay, so just to continue from where we left off, what we did so far is we looked at an example client billable project in NetSuite. Am I sharing my screen at the moment?
Yeah, looks good.
Perfect. Okay, so yeah, we've had a look at an example project in NetSuite. We've had a look at some of our billing options, some of our project preferences. We looked at advanced project budgets, and now the next one we're going to look at is the resources tab. So the resources tab is where we can create our resource allocations, and resource allocations are designed to help resource managers allocate and assign the right resource to project based on availability, skill sets, and other criteria. After a resource has been allocated or reserved to a project manager may then decide to assign that project resource to a specific project task. Now, before we can use resource allocations, as Gerry showed earlier, there is a preference that we need to enable under Enable Features. Okay, and once enabled, what the system will also suggest you do is install some related Suite apps, such as the resource allocation chart and resource skills. But before we go into those, let's just have a look at some of our resource allocations. So under the Resources tab, we will see a list of all of our resources that are allocated to this project. And we have a mixture of resources here. So we've got some placeholders down here. These are placeholders that we've added or allocated to our resource, maybe because at this point in time, we're not sure who we're going to utilize. Now, we know we need a trainer and a consultant, but we haven't finalized who we need to actually use on this project. We also have named allocations. So these are final resources that are going to be working on this project. Let's open up one of these allocations. So when allocating a resource, you get to select which resource you want to allocate on this project. You tell the system, this is the start and end date in terms of when we need this resource. And this is how many hours we need the resource for. You can also specify an allocation tab, which the options we have in NetSuite are hard and soft. And these are just for indication purposes. This example that we're looking at on screen simply indicates that this allocation is not flexible, i.e., other project managers or resource managers who are wanting to utilize add-on on their project, this is a note to say that this is not a flexible booking. Therefore, ABI is required on this project. If you change it to soft, you're just indicating to other project managers and resource managers that you can actually utilize ABI if there are other priority projects. Right, so we have just seen an example allocation, but there are some key elements missing from this allocation page, such as the availability of resource, the skill sets, and that's where the resource allocation chart grid comes into play. So far, we are, from this page, we're having to select which resource we want to utilize without having access to any of that other information. Okay, so next we will take a look at the resource allocation chart grid SuiteApp. Again, another SuiteApp that's available under the SuiteApp marketplace, which you can install and configure. So just before I go into the resource allocation chart, let me bring up my slide deck. Okay, so in terms of how the resource allocation chart is used in NetSuite, so the process starts off with a project manager or resource manager using the resource allocation chart to carry out an automated search, which could be based off capacity, skills, and CV resume information. Once the resource has been allocated to a project, the project manager could plan the project, and they may have used generic resources initially, placeholder resources on their projects. Now, once the final resources are allocated to the project manager can swap those resources with the final resources, and then finally assign them to specific tasks. Once this is all done, you will also have access to real-time reporting, such as the forecast utilization. Okay, let's go back into the system now. And before we look at the resource chart allocation, grid and allocation, let's take a very quick look at the resource skill set bundle. Again, this is a free bundle that you can install and start using. And this what we're going to look at now is how skills are configured, and then how these are then utilized when searching for resources in the resource allocation chart and grid. Okay, so let me open up resource allocation chart, and then whilst that's loading, we'll have a look at resource skill category list, skill list, and skill level list. So the resource skill sets bundle gives you 3 pages where you can create your skill categories. In this instance, we've got product knowledge and technical skills. We then have list of skills, so you can create as many of these as you wish, and then assign these to your resources. All of these could be grouped by skill category. And lastly, you can define in the system your skills levels, which are again assigned to skill categories. Now let's have a look at an example employee record and see how these are allocated to resources. Now, I also want to mention that even though an administrator, project manager, or resource managers could do this, you can also give the permission to the employees to maintain their skills themselves. So on an employee record, we have the skills and expertise tab. When we click on the skills and expertise tab, we'll have various information again about the skills that are allocated or assigned to add-on. We also have the other skills, the technical skills that are assigned to add-on with the level that we have predefined. And on this same page, we also have access to the previously worked projects by Abby Kwan, and also a place for where Abby Kwan can upload her CV. Now, all of what we looked at so far is available on vendor records, so vendors that you might be utilizing as subcontractors. So perhaps uploading a CV could be very useful on vendor records, just so you can actually have a look and see which vendor is best fit for your project. Lastly, you can also specify the years of experience in the years of experience field, and then all of this information will be searchable. So now let's have a look at the resource allocation chart and grid. Okay, so what you're seeing on screen is the resource allocation chart and grid SuiteApp. And what that allows you to do is you can view this information in a grid view or chart format. Now, chart format allows you to manage allocations using visual allocation bars like what we're seeing on screen. And for each resource, we have what we call the summary row. And the summary row shows the total percentage of allocated time to a resource. You can also choose to view the grid by day, week, or month. And the calculations on this screen are all color-coded. So you can tell at a glance when a resource is overbooked. If we hover over to our information button, that will give us some indication about the colors. So for instance, the yellow indicates that a resource is utilized up to 25%, whereas red indicates that a resource is overbooked. And you can customize these colors if needed. Now, if we expand any of these resources, we will see all the allocations for a resource and all the projects that they are allocated to. The number on the bars indicate how many hours a resource is allocated to a particular project. From here, you can hover over to the employee name just to view employee details. Similarly, you can hover over to the project name on the left-hand side to view project details, and also hover over to the bar to see the booking details. You can click on the bars directly from here and make any changes to the resource allocations. Now, switching over to the grid view pretty much displays the same information, but just in a grid format. Again, each resource has a summary row, and we can tell by just looking at this information that our resource called Abby Kwan, she's overly booked during this time period. So perhaps we need to do something about her resource allocations. Now, one thing I quite like about the grid view over the chart view, even though I prefer the chart view, you can simply directly click on each cell and do the allocation directly from here. So you can enter the numbers into these cells and the resources will be allocated automatically. Going back to the chart view, if you want to create a new resource allocation, you have to click on New Resource Allocation. Now, we looked at resource allocation on the project record where we had to specify the resource when we're creating a new resource allocation. With the resource allocation chart, what it gives you is this little magnifying glass that you can click on, and that has various parameters for searching resources. So you can search resources based on availability, based on the skill sets, based on maybe maximum labor cost, even minimum years of experience. So if you're looking for maybe someone who's very experienced on a particular topic. Now, for the sake of this session, I'm going to select ERP skill. So what I'm doing here is I'm searching for resources with ERP skill. Clicking on submit will bring back all the resources that match my criteria, which in this instance, I said I need someone with ERP skills. So the system has gone in and looked through all the resources and provides me with a list of resources that match my skill set that I have specified. Some useful information in here, such as availability. So I can tell at a glance that even though I'd love to use Abby Kwan on this project that I'm about to create an allocation for, her availability is 0%. but I can potentially use Abigail Khan, who's also got 100% skill set score. So she has good ERP skills and her availability is 100%. So I could potentially use Abigail Khan on my project, as well as Adam Young, who seems to have 90% availability. So if I wanted to select any of those, you'd be simply selecting the resource and then carry on filling in the resource allocation form. Okay, some nice to haves for resource allocation chart is being able to copy and paste bookings to save time. That's something that we don't currently have in the resource allocation chart. It would be really good and handy if we were able to copy a booking from one resource and paste it on another resource who might also be working on the same project. And the other one I would say is booking for multiple resources. Currently, you have to create each individual resource allocation for each resource by clicking on new resource allocation. But I remember from my consultancy days where we had cases where multiple consultants had to be on site, and where you can create one resource allocation with multiple resources that are going to be on site on the same day. So that's another thing that I thought I'll point out that you can't do with resource allocation. Now, moving over to the task assignments now. So let's go back to our project. So everything around task assignments is under the schedule tab. So the schedule is also known as the project plan, and this is the heart of the project record. What it has under the schedule tab is a list of tasks and their hierarchy. And what happens is resources in NetSuite are assigned to tasks to track time and enter expenses. Let's just quickly review a slide deck on tasks. Okay, as we said, the resources in NetSuite, whether those are named resources or vendors or subcontractors, they get assigned to tasks on the project records. And only once they're assigned to project tasks, they can enter time and expenses. There is a preference that will allow you to bypass that rule, but the NetSuite leading practice is that you only allow resources to enter time and expenses if they're assigned to project tasks. It's also worth making a note of a bundle called Project Task Manager, which can also help you with your task assignments. And I'm going to be showing you the bundle in a moment. Okay, let's go back to NetSuite now. So a couple of things we could do here. We can create a new task. We can also create a new milestone and view the Gantt chart directly under the schedule subtab. So just to take a look at some of the different types of tasks in this list, we've got various different types of tasks. So we've got what we call summary tasks. So I'm going to highlight just some of them. These are what we call summary tasks, and they are used for rolling up the numbers. So if we wanted to roll up numbers just for reporting purposes, we can use these. They are not assigned with any resources and only used for reporting purposes. What we then have is what we call working tasks or work tasks. This is where resources are assigned to carry out work. Now let's have a look at an example task record. I'm going to edit one of the tasks on my list. Okay, so what do we have in here? In the primary section, we have the task name, the status, and so forth. And in the middle, we have some calculated fields under the project task overview, such as actual work, which means how many hours of timesheets have been entered in the system for this task. What's the % complete of this task or percentage of completion? Under the project date section, we have project date related information such as the constraint type. And the options we have there are as soon as possible, which means the NetSuite will calculate the earliest possible start date for a task based on existing predecessors. Or you can pick fixed start date, which means the system will ignore all the predecessors for this task. Okay, so on the first tab, we've got assignees. on a task record. Assignees is where we specify the resources who are going to be working on these tasks. So you can assign a named user, and you can have one resource or multiple resources assigned to one task. You can have generic resources. So if you're at an early stage of your planning of your project, you might not have the final resources. You might just say you need a consultant. You can also have resource groups and subcontractors, in other words, vendors, as assignee on the task. Now, what I quite like about is the assign group members. When we click on that assign group members button, from there, you can pick your resource group that Gerry covered earlier. So the resource groups that we saw earlier were consultants and technical consultants. So these could be resources who work together on a regular basis. And to save time, you can simply pick your resource groups, enter the number of hours they're going to be working or they're going to be spending on this task, tell the system or ask the system to divide these hours. And by just clicking on add, the system will automatically add all of those resources at a single click to the task record. Okay, so under the predecessors tab, this is where we can specify the task dependencies such that one task can be dependent on another one before it can begin. So for example, what we're looking at here is the requirements documentation task. And under the predecessors tab, we have basically told the system the requirements documentation tab can't begin or start before requirements gathering is complete. And what we've also said is we have added 2 days of lag time. Maybe we need some extra time to just confirm a few more requirements before we can start documenting them. So let me come out of the task record. Okay, let's have a look at the Project Task Manager bundle that I have mentioned earlier. So what we looked at so far is tasks for one single project. What the Project Task Manager bundle does is it gives you a holistic view of all of your tasks in one place. And it allows you to identify tasks that are under or overutilized. So like with the resource a bit like the resource allocation chart, you can clearly see the tasks that are over assigned, which are shown in red. Some of the things you can do through here is you can change the task details by clicking on the bars and changing the task details instead of going into the schedule tab. You can also adjust the information on these tasks as well by literally just dragging and dropping these bars or just extending the size of the bars. Okay, let's go back to our project. You can, as we said earlier, you can also create milestones under the schedule tab. They are created in exactly the same way as a normal task, but just without assigning a resource. And I have a couple of examples in here. Like I've got a milestone for phase 0 sign off, a milestone for implementation sign off, and a milestone for go live. A couple of other things you could do with task assignments is you can assign resources from other subsidiaries. And you can also assign vendors or subcontractors who can enter time and expenses for the project. If you do assign a vendor to a particular task, the vendors will have access to a vendor center or vendor role where they can go into log into NetSuite and enter timesheets directly using NetSuite. If you do use resources from other subsidiaries, you will have access to the intercompany time and expenses feature, which is part of the job costing module. And that enables you to enter intercompany time and expenses, and also allows you to do the transfer of time, expense, or both charges from one subsidiary to another. Okay, now that we have we've found our resources, we've allocated, we've assigned them to specific tasks, let's have a look at project billing. And we are specifically going to have a look at charge-based billing. Okay, so what we're going to have a look now is how we generate our project charges. So assuming at this point we have had expenses submitted by our project resources, timesheets entered by our resources, and various other charges. We're going to look at how we can generate those charges. how we can manage those charges, and how we can invoice our project or project charges. So all of that is under the Financials tab. So under the Financials tab, there's a Charge Run History tab. If we click on the Charge Run History, we have access to Generate Charges button. What that will do is, clicking on that button will generate any charges using the charge rules that we have covered earlier. But the system also does this automatically via an overnight job. If we have a look at the Charge Run History, you can see a list of all the automated, what the automated job has executed and created. So you'll have audit log of all the charges that are created and the number of charges that are created, all directly under the Charge Run History tab. Okay, so we did say that there is an overnight job, which will automatically create this for you. But if you do need to create any more charges throughout the day, you can come here and click on the Generate Charges. Let's go back to the charge summary now. We've looked at this earlier, but we didn't spend too much time. So this is an area where it will show us information such as how much charges have we got in the system that are ready for billing? How much of those charges are put on hold for billing? How much did we bill already, and how much is pending for our review? We can also see how much charges are remaining in total for this project. Okay, let's click on the pending charges. These are charges that are created and ready to be billed. So from this page, a project manager or a revenue manager or an AR analyst can go into this page before a project invoice is generated and review the charges. So we've got various different type of charges here. Expenses, we've got some expenses, some time-based charges, and at the moment, they're all allocated with a charge stage ready, which means if we do create our invoice now, all of these charges will be included in that invoice. But if you're not ready to bill, there's a couple of things you could do in here. So you could mark the charge for hold. So you can select individual charges. Perhaps you need to confirm something before billing a specific charge. You can put that charge on hold and come back later. You can also mark as non-billable. What that means is it won't be billed, but will still be used in reporting. And finally, we have zero out charges. The amount will go to zero, but it will stay in the same stage. So it will be included in your project invoice with a zero line. Let's go back to our project. So what we are going to do now is we are going to show you how we can bill the ready for billing amount, which were the charges that we just looked at. So you can create project-based invoices in two ways, or charge-based invoices in two ways. You can either, using your create new button on the project record, create an invoice and it will add all the charges from the project, or you can do it from the invoice billable customers page, which is the recommended way of doing it. So for that, I'm just going to change my role and select my AR analyst role. We look at the invoice billable customers page. So this page will have some filters at the top of the page, such as the invoice date and the form that we want to use and the AR account. And we can also pick from and to dates. So these are which charges do we want to include in this invoice run. On the right hand side, we can select which type of charges we want to include in our invoice run as well. Now there is a very important checkbox in here, which is show invoices. If that's unchecked, what the system will do is it will just say you have 22 project related invoices to create. Clicking on submit will create all those 22 invoices for you. What our leading practices suggest is that you have this checked just so that when you scroll down on that page, you can see a list of all the project related invoices across all projects that are ready to be created. So from here, what you can do is you can either select all of them and create them, or have a look at an individual one. So this one here is for the project that we've been looking at. So clicking on the invoice hyperlink will take us into the invoice and show us the invoice. And then what it will do is it will try and generate all of those, it will try and collect all of those charges and add them to the invoice. What I am going to show you is another invoice that was that's already seeded into this demo set, just to show you what a typical project related invoice looks like. So on this invoice, we have some expense lines and some professional services hours as well. Let's go ahead and print this invoice. Okay, so on a typical invoice in NetSuite, you will have the invoice details such as the invoice number, the customer details, and also the items that we're billing our customers. But what generally happens with specifically service companies or consulting companies, they would require what's called a backing sheet. So for example, we've got some professional services hours that we're billing our customer for, 48 hours worth of professional service hours. What customers would generally require is the backing sheets for those, just so for you to show a bit more information as to why they are being billed 48 hours. That's where invoice presentation template SuiteApp comes into play. So what invoice presentation template SuiteApp does is it adds additional pages to your invoices, and those additional pages can show various details about the service items that you're billing. So for example, those 48 hours of professional services lines that we saw on the first page, by just looking at the second page, we can clearly see those were for our resources Abby Kwan and Tracy Little. On these dates, they have been doing on-site consultancy for requirements gathering. So your customer has access to all of that information and all the breakdown of those hours. If we continue, we have the same information for expenses as well, as to which expense category it was, on which dates, and what the amount was, and so forth. And lastly, and that's something great about invoice presentation template SuiteApp, is that on the last page, it will include copies of receipts for those expenses. So hopefully by going through all these pages, the customers should have everything they need, all the evidence they need to make the payments for these project-related invoices. Okay, before we go into project monitoring, for the billing part, I'm just going to go back in as my project manager role. And I want to show you a useful report, which is the project billings report. So the project billings report basically shows you a list of all the projects in the system, along with billings to date. So how much have we billed on these projects to date? What are the pending charges that are ready to be billed? So at a glance, we can see all the charges that are ready to be billed, total billings, planned billings, and remaining billings as well. This report that also allows you to specify the statuses that you want to include in project statuses that you want to include in this report as well. So you can simply say, by using this filter, I want to only see the projects that are in progress, but I don't want to see any projects that are closed. And like with any other report in NetSuite, you can either decide to print this report, email it, or schedule it so that it can be run on a schedule. So finally, I want to cover project monitoring and then hand over to my colleague, Gerry. So for project monitoring, what I want to do is cover some of the tools that are available to support project monitoring. So some of the, let's go back into our slide deck before we continue. So some of the tools we have available for us to support project monitoring in NetSuite are Project Schedule, Gantt Chart, Project Dashboard, and Project 360 SuiteApp. Got to admit, the Project 360 SuiteApp is my favorite out of all. I see that as a one-stop shop for all project-related information, but Gerry is going to cover that as part of the SuiteApp section. So let's just have a look at project schedule, Gantt chart, and the project dashboard. Going back to my NetSuite account, on our project record, under the schedule tab, we have various views that are available for us. So let's just have a look at some of them. So if we switch over to the overview view, that will basically show all of our tasks and their status. It will also include the % complete for each one of our tasks. You can change the view to something like planning, for example. And what that will do is planning view looks at the relationship between tasks. So you can see all the predecessors between each task, or the relationships between each task, the start date and end dates, what the planned work for each task is, and also the estimated cost. So these views, you do get some of them by default, but you can also customize these views if need be. Okay, Gantt chart. Let's have a look at the Gantt chart. So we can access the Gantt chart directly from the Schedule tab. Let's open up the Gantt chart. So a Gantt chart is a bar chart that represents the project schedule, and it shows the start, end date, and the progress of each individual task. Some of the things you could do with the Gantt chart in NetSuite is you can use these controls to change the size of the chart. You can also move forward and back in time just using these controls. You can also highlight the critical path. So checking highlight critical path, what NetSuite does is it highlights the tasks that must stay on a schedule for the project to be completed in time by using the predecessors information that you have specified on the task record. Let's close.
Quick question here. Someone asked in the chat, is there a way to download or export the Gantt chart? I don't think there is, but are you aware of any functionality?
No, one thing you can do is you can zoom to fit into one page, and you can simply just use the default browser printing options to print the Gantt chart.
Okay.
So you can print it and attach it to an email, but there isn't a specific functionality within the Gantt chart itself to do any printing or exporting. If you want to share the Gantt chart with an existing NetSuite user, you can simply copy this link and share it with another NetSuite user, obviously a NetSuite user of your account. Okay, so just closing down the Gantt chart. Project Dashboard is another useful tool that can be used for monitoring a project, and you can access Project Dashboard via this little icon on the project record, or by clicking on the View Dashboard link. Both of those will take you to the same place. So let's just have a look at Project Dashboard and what it offers. So this is a dashboard specific for this project. And similar to your main NetSuite Home dashboard, you can access a project dashboard information to a specific individual project, and you can also personalize it as however you wish. Some of the things it offers are, under the project links, you can create project tasks, manage resources, and enter time and expenses. The % complete KPI meter offers at a glance look at where your project is along the timeline. So in this case, we can clearly see that 20% of this project is complete. You also have access to the Gantt chart directly through the project dashboard, and also key performance indicators, which shows additional information about the health of your project. Right, I know we've covered a lot today, but that is it from me. I hope that was useful. I will pass over to Gerry now, and he will cover some of the useful project-related suite apps and reports.
Very good, Ali. Thank you. Can you see my desktop?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. All right, yeah, a lot of good content there, we hope. Let's wrap it up by looking at some of the suite apps. and I'll go directly into the system and walk you through some of these. So from the SuiteApp marketplace, I looked here for Oracle NetSuite Project, and then it shows up the SuiteApps that are available. They're all free. Someone had a message in the chat that he or she could not access it, but they should be free. So maybe some prerequisites are missing. This one is relatively new, and we're still working on implementing that in the data sets. So we have limited information to share on that. But let me start off by going to the Project 360 SuiteApp. So I'll be going through a project and navigate around and end up on the project record itself. And then we can cover from there the purchase, the procurement, the project, and the presentation template. But this is Project 360, the landing page. Now, this is my project portfolio, meaning I'm the project manager. These are the projects that I manage. You can collapse this menu here to get some extra real estate. And then out here are my different projects. If I click on the project ID, that's going to open the project itself, the project record. Project name is what you want to click on to get the dashboard to ping. So here again, my menu now has changed, but now I have 5 subtabs. We have tiles across the board for all these subtabs. And as I make my way down here, most of these are self-explanatory. It shows us where we're at, what our profitability is, when we expect to complete this. And here are my team details. Underneath that, we have some documents that might be tied to the project and the client contact. Then we have resource planning. Again, it gives you the summary up top here, customer, the contact information. Then I can take action from here. I can view my Gantt chart, but the Gantt chart is also showing down here. Now, this is a different project than what Ali showed, but same functionality applies to this chart that he showed. So I can highlight the critical path, for instance. All the full functionality is available in the dashboard. Then I have a resource allocation chart here. I want to bring up this button one more time. Ali showed an example there to staff a software project. Since I deal with more product-based companies, again, this account looks slightly different. So we might be looking at different skills, different experiences, etc. If you don't select anything and you say submit, then you can actually see across the board the various skills, and you can just do a drop down here and say, I just need to look for a basic math lab or an expert. I just happen to have just one resource that's an expert on that particular skill set. So that's all available within the Project 360. Then we have our milestones and we have our timesheet tracking. Further down, we have our allocated or our actual hours versus planned. So we see that where we are at this point when you hover over it. Then we have a budget and estimate at complete section. So when we go down here, what's very nice is you can see what our labor breaks down to. If I click on that, we see that we have consulting, technical services, project management, and training. And we have the same for expenses and supplier expenses. You can see contract labor and purchases. Then we have a financial section, billing and revenue. I'm going to open this in a new tab because we can demonstrate the invoice presentation template from there. So here we have some unbilled charges paid, and then the last section here is our financial section where we get a nice summary of our expenses, services, etc. So that's all available within the Project 360. I can also navigate to my other projects in the portfolio, so I don't have to go back to the menu if needed. But I opened up that invoice. Ali already talked about the invoice presentation template. If I were to print this, it is going to give us a breakdown on the various sections with a lot more detail than what we would see in the UI here. The invoice presentation template can be defined in 3 different places. So here we are in the invoice. If we go to the billing subtab, we can say which template we want to use. We can also define it at the customer record, and we can also define it at the project level. So when we look at that printout, see, this is what we see in the UI, but go further down, it's actually giving us a breakdown. In this case, by employee first, then the dates, etc. And as Ali showed earlier, so we define these different sections, and we have a checkbox that says, do you want to include any receipts that are associated with this invoice? So here it retrieved the invoices. So the other place where you can see this is at the customer. I'm going to open the customer for a moment, and then we'll go take a look at the definition of the invoice presentation template. So the customer record, I believe it is under the financial subtab. And we have our invoice presentation template. Let me move over to my administrator role, because we need some administrator privileges to define the different sections on the invoice presentation template. I'm going to open that project, and then I'm also going to show you under transactions, sales. This is where we can define our templates, and we have an IPT preference. The invoice presentation template itself, we are using, I believe, the IPT one here. So let's take a look at that. It allows you to define how you want to lay out that PDF template. So I can select my subsidiaries. Here's the checkbox that says, do I want to include those receipts? And then here I can say, how do we want to summarize things? I can go in these columns and I can make changes as needed. So we can reorganize. Some customers might want to see it by item first. Some customers might want to see it by task. So you can group by different sections here. You can also define the IPT, invoice presentation template, on the project itself under the financial tab. Here is our invoice presentation tab. Now, the other SuiteApp is Procure to Project. So for that SuiteApp to work, there's two sections of it. One, there's preferences. So allow this to apply to purchase orders and vendor bills. And then there's a procurement subtab. Now, if I'm going to open a purchase order form, it is going to show me a project vendor list. And that project vendor list, we define, if I have my vendor open here, we can define that on the vendor itself. So here's my PO, and I have a project vendor list. So this is not just a regular PO where I can select any vendor. These vendors are specific project resources. Now, when I go to that vendor, this is what I showed earlier in the presentation, actually. So this is where you say project vendor. But you can also use them as a resource if you were to go under the financial tab. And here's the project resource checkbox. Now, what I also have on that project is a bundle that is custom. And the reason why I wanted to bring that up is we have quite a few products customers that are using this. If you are a manufacturer, maybe you want to track some of the expenses at the work order level. So when I go to my related records, you can see that I have a number of work order transactions here. I have a work order issue, might have some completions, a work order close. I can even have an assembly build. So we can tag these transactions with the project number, but also the task. And that results then in some project costing that we can see within the project record. And it also provides additional reporting. This is a customization that's been installed quite a bit. So the product team is working on including it in core functionality. But at this point, it is a customization that's delivered by our professional services. But for additional reporting, then you would get a manufacturing project general ledger, which brings it down to the individual transactions. We also have a project income statement. And then we also have a budget versus actual, which should have loaded, but in the example that I had up, we did not have any variances, but you would see the various variances out here under the percent difference. The other suite app, let me see here, because we had project classification is another one. So that is a fairly straightforward one. On the project record, we can here have our segmentation for classification by class, department, or location. And then the other one that we have that we're working on and including, I need to go to a different account because it has not been released to our solution consultants yet, but that would be the percent complete. The project, I'm sorry, project cost to cost percent complete. So that's a cost-based percent complete approach to recognize revenue on projects. So if I go to this example that we see it, essentially what it allows you to do is move the percent complete forward as you are recognizing revenue. Before this was a calculated field, and now you have a little bit more control over it. So it uses a cost-based percent complete to recognize the revenue on those project contracts, but it also gives you flexibility to define the basis of the cost budget. So here we have our percent complete. When we go down to our financial section, here we have a percent complete override. We also have a rule that we can define. So here you say what goes into it. And then we have our percent complete percentage is how we are expecting revenue to mature as we're moving forward. Then the last thing we wanted to cover was some reporting. And I'm going to go back to the other account one more time.
Quick question, Gary. We've got, is the custom bundle shared?
No, that's not a publicly available bundle. It does actually need to be scoped. You're talking about the manufacturing bundle, right?
Correct.
Yeah, it does need to be scoped. It varies for every implementation, but yeah, it's being worked on to be included because we have a lot of customers that are interested in that functionality.
Awesome.
Now for reporting, I just went to the reporting section. Ali briefly talked about the project billing report, so I'm not going to cover that again, but there's so many nice reports. One, for instance, where we can do allocated utilization by the resource. This shows really nicely in the sense that we have all our resources available in one report, and we can see to what extent they have been utilized. So for instance, Abby Kwan is overutilized in May, as well in June, and we can actually see, if we were to expand all the different sections, on what projects she is working on. We have a total, an aggregate on the right-hand side. Another powerful report would be under the project profitability reports. So when we open up that report, it opens up a different section on its own. I'm going to open this budget versus actual. And here again, we see by customer or by project that we're working on where we are at. We can expand all the different sections and we can see a breakdown on what our different costs are. Can expand it, all the different expenses. And then when we go into the detail, we can actually see all the transactions that make up the figures that we're looking at. So I think, Ali, that in terms of reporting, that is all we wanted to highlight. Was there anything that I'm missing here? And if not, then that would conclude the presentation, and we can open it up for questions.
Thank you, Gerry. I think that was all that we wanted to cover, the main reports. But yeah, we've got a suite of reports that are available for projects in the NetSuite accounts.
So Corey or Mike or whoever wants to take over, or we can just certainly open it for questions. But that's all we had in mind.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, so does anybody have any questions for Gerry or Ali? Here's one. Is it possible to see related expense reports on a project record? Gerry, I know I saw that earlier, and I know that I've had to do customizations in the past to get those to show. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Corey, I'll just jump in here for that
Okay,
one.
yeah.
That is exactly what I've done in that data set. So I've had to configure a save search, a custom save search, and it's very simple to create those and list it as a sublist view. So Gerry, if you don't mind bringing up a sample project, maybe one of the ones that you were looking at earlier.
This is your account. Do you want to take over, or do you want to tell me how to drive? Either way is fine.
What I can do is let me share my screen and take over. 1 second.
While you're doing that, I'll also point out that I think that there's another thing you have to do is that you can't have multiple projects associated to one expense report. You can only do one expense report per project to get it to show as a sublist on the project, if that makes sense. So yeah, so you have to have it kind of at the header level of the expense report.
I think I've been able to display the line details as well, but yeah, let's just have a look at the related records on this one here. So here's a sub list that's basically just showing us all the expense reports that are allocated to this project and the details of those expenses. But like Corey said, I don't think this expense report sublist is standard. If I remember correctly, I had to create a save search, as I said, very basic save search, which looks at the expense reports transactions and also displayed the save search as a sublist view. If you want, I can quickly cover the details of that as well. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, we have a tip and trick in our website on how to do those sublists.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so let's not go through it right now, but just another quick question. So I think that also applies to the purchase orders. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, and looking at this data set here now, we've got exactly the same for purchase orders as well, where you can see all the pretty much all of these sublists here, they are very similar, created in exactly the same manner. It just means that on each one of them, on the save searches that are running behind them, they are filtered by specific transaction types. That's all it is.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Yep, so here's another question. If you guys want to read that in the chat window.
Gerry, do you mind reading that question? I don't know where the chat section has gone from my screen. Oh, there it is.
What is the expectation for creating projects from sales orders? It seems like you would need to know the cost for the project before you go through and gather hours worked and expenses.
So with that, what you can do is you can also assign your projects with sales orders. And in terms of knowing what costs to allocate and create those sales orders, you can create what's called the forecasted charges on your projects. So if I just go back into my project record, on the project record, we looked at certain charge rules like the fixed fee charge rules, the time-based charge rules. And after you create your plan, what the system will allow you to do is create a sales order directly off the project record. And the sales order will basically automatically create the lines based on your forecasted charges. Does that answer the question, or was it slightly different?
Great, thank you.
Awesome.
And I just posted a link to how to create a sublist with a save search from our website in the chat window there for anybody that's interested. Another question there from Roy. I'll go ahead and read it. Is there a reason why billable time entry shows as 0 cost on the invoice? A time material project, once invoice shows 100% profit, even though there is a tied time entry with a cost.
Where in specific, Roy, does it show that billable time entry shows a 0 cost? Is it the invoice printout?
Hey, this is Roy. No, this would actually be on the invoice itself, the transaction.
Let me have a look. So I can bring up an invoice on screen. Let's just bring up one of the example invoices. Getting close to 6 o'clock PM in the UK, so my internet is starting to slow down now that everyone is, I guess, opening up their Netflix or getting ready for the Champions League game. Right, is it on the invoice transaction page or the sorry, is it, and it was at the printout? I'm trying to work out where it shows 0.
It would be on the invoice itself. So normally there would be a cost estimate type. Like if you were to sell material, cost estimate type would be, preferred vendor rate, average cost, or whatever. But if it's a time entry that's been billed, it comes over as custom as the cost estimate type with a cost of 0, even though there's cost on the time entry.
And is that another column on the at the line level on the invoice?
It is, yeah.
Okay. Doesn't look like we've got that visible in here. What we'll do, Roy, if you don't mind just sending us a quick email, or if Gary, if you can take maybe Roy's email address, we can come back to you on that one, if that's okay.
That would be fine. In fact, it was an enhancement request that NetSuite support just put in. So I know the destination right now. It's just we're trying to figure out when you pay people on gross profit, it looks a little bit more favorable when it's time entries, if that makes sense. So especially when it's 100% gross margin. But yeah, they said that was an enhancement request and they have filed it. I thought it would have been a defect because there's cost entry associated all the way up into the time of invoicing, But just curious if you guys knew off the top of your head. I'm good. Thank you.
And if you could let us know maybe the case reference number as well, we can maybe take a look internally just to see how that's getting, how we're doing with that one.
Yeah, I'll be happy to. Thank you. Good job today.
Thank you.
I put our email addresses in the chat there, Roy.
All right, any other questions? Sorry to interrupt.
All right.
I have another one. Is it possible to create, right now, if we have a milestone billing and then we have a time and material project, we always have to create a time and material sub-project because the two can't, they have to be separated.
Sorry, Roy, I'm not quite sure if I understand that question.
Yeah, so we have a milestone billing project where, folks want to be based, they want to bill based on a milestone, whatever that is. And then we also have time and materials that have to also get invoiced, but we have to create sub-projects of the milestone billing one in order for it to invoice correctly. And maybe, and we've been on this, we've been using SRP, I guess, SuiteProjects since 2014. So maybe there are some things that have changed and we haven't fully leveraged the platform.
Let me just confirm a few things here. Are you using the billing type as charge-based?
It would be milestone billing type in that case.
Okay, yes. So all the other billing types that are available on a project record, other than the charge-based ones, are slightly outdated now. Charge-based is the most popular option, and it kind of caters for everything the other billing types cater for, and even more. So if you use charge-based billing, what that will enable you to do is you can specify your milestone rules. Let me just give you an example to say, on go live, we are gonna, and so let's select the go live milestone from our tasks. We're gonna bill $50,000. That's our milestone set up in the system or on our project record. So this is available now. We can also set up time-based rules as well as milestone. So in one single project, you can capture both time-based charges and your milestone charges as well. So I think it sounds like the key for you, Roy, is to explore the billing type charge-based. Definitely can do both of that in one project.
Man, that's a miracle. That's awesome. I'm so glad I joined this meeting today. We're so living in 2014.
Cool. That's good to know that there was something valuable out of this meeting today.
I also tell you, Roy, it seems like you are on the implementation side, or those data sets you can request too if you need to ever demonstrate this functionality to customers. We have these, if you're part of the partner network, you can request these data sets.
We're a customer of NetSuite. Would that be the same course?
Okay, no, I thought you were mentioning somewhere that some of your customers, but I was assuming that you were a partner.
No, and that reference to the Gantt chart, our customers want to see the outline of our project and how long it's going to take. It's kind of an automotive experience since we, yeah, if you check out our website, crossco.com, we test airbag deployments. So for like Tesla and all those fun cars, and they want to see the Gantt chart. They want to, I guess, touch and feel it. So there are some third parties that are out there that I've discovered that have that capability to be able to export a Gantt chart for others on the call. I didn't know if it was coming down the pipeline with native NetSuite soon.
It's definitely an enhancement, Roy.
Project line on a print on a.
There's a lot of demand for that feature, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm hoping it will get implemented at some point.
Fingers crossed. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, this is good timing to conclude this presentation. Thank you so much again, Gerry and Ali. That was a great presentation and a really great tour of projects. So I'm going to take it from here. I'm going to go into our 2023.1 update highlights. I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen here. Okay, so 2023.1, so everybody should be on this version of NetSuite at this point. I think the last rollout was, or the final phase of rollouts was in April, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to go through some of the highlights. Obviously not going to be able to cover all of the new things that came out, but we'll try and hit just the key points here. And again, this is subjective too. So it's the things that I looked at and thought were good parts of the update. So just in case you didn't know where you can find the new release notes, there's two places. One of them is on your dashboard when the new release is about to come out. There's this new release portlet on your homepage dashboard. If the portlet's not expanded, you can click on the little bar at the top and click on the release notes. And that'll bring up the PDF of all of those release notes. And one thing that I will mention is that sometimes those release notes change during the release cycle. So you might have release notes version 1, and then something changes and maybe they can't put out one of the features that they were going to release, like Cache 360, for example. I think they released it once and then backed out of it and then waited for another release cycle or two. But anyway, just keep that in mind when you're checking the release notes. You can also go to Suite Answers and just do a search for new release notes, and you should be able to find it that way too. So the first one I'm going to talk about is revenue management. It's now part of the period close checklist. This applies to if you do revenue recognition through like the advanced revenue management module. It is now part of the period close checklist. So there's a recognized revenue task and a reclass revenue task. Now, normally, if you're doing advanced revenue management, these tasks are scheduled and automated. So you probably don't need to do this during your period close, but it does give you the ability to check in and make sure that everything has run correctly. Sometimes those revenue recognition tasks have errors and they may not get noticed right away. So this is maybe a good time to also look at those errors to see if anything came up. So that's now part of the period close checklist. Oops, did I go too far? No. Okay, so next one is I have a couple of different sections on the account maintenance. So the data storage tab has been removed. It's no longer tracked by NetSuite for your service tier. That is different from the file cabinet storage that is still tracked, and that's part of your NetSuite service tier. So just in case you were looking for this storage info, it's not going to be there anymore because it's not being tracked. The next thing is that you can subscribe to the data center status info. You can go to status.netsuite.com and you can subscribe to updates that are data center specific. So when you do this, you click that subscribe to updates button, and then you can choose all of the different data centers that you want to get notifications on, or you can just choose your own data center. If you want to find your own data center, you can go to, and this is new as well, relatively new, you go to setup, company, and then company information. And there's a little blurb on there that tells you what data center your NetSuite account is being stored on. Next one is scheduled scripts. They do not automatically run after sandbox refresh. This is, I think, a nice feature because maybe sandbox will have some errors that come up and scripting errors that come up, and then administrators get all of these error notifications. So scheduled scripts are account specific. So if they're configured in production, they will no longer run automatically in sandbox after a refresh. Instead, you'd have to go in and set those up and reschedule those manually in the sandbox account. Also, end of support for new SMS / voice setup for two-factor authentication or 2FA. So as of March 1st of this year, two-factor authentication for SMS voice call will no longer be available. This change will not affect already existing 2FA setups, but it means that if you have a new user in your account that's using a role that requires 2FA, then you will only be able to use the Authenticator app. And in an Authenticator app, there's a bunch of them out there. I think they're all free. There's one from Google, Microsoft, LastPass. You can use any of them for this Authenticator app. I think by default, the administrator role and any role that has the core administrator functions checkbox set, 2FA is required. But for most roles in your account, it's not required, but you can turn it on and make it required for any role in your account. But by default, it's really just the administrator roles that this affects. All right, next one is banking. So improved CSV bank statement file parsing. So in version 23.1 of the bank statement parser SuiteApp, you no longer need to manually remove the time zone, and footer from your CSV bank statement file before importing. The parser automatically removes them to lessen errors typically caused by manual editing. So this is if you're manually importing your bank statement files into your banking processes. Electronic bank payments. So now you process payments for customers from primary or secondary banks. You can now process payments using the entity bank list. The entity bank list is available on the EFT subtab for invoice and credit memo transactions. So multiple options there now. And then tracking the log status of entity banks, you can track the status of deleted, removed, or reassigned entity bank. You can track the entity bank status by using the bank details logs column on the bank details subtab. So some updates to the electronic bank import or payments. Also support for two-factor authentication for bank statement import. So there's a SuiteApp called Auto Bank Statement Import, or ABSI for short. And you can now automatically import bank statements from financial institutions that require two-factor authentication. So this was a problem where you would try and re-import, and then the bank was requiring 2FA, and then the import would fail because you'd have to basically go in and do the 2FA every time. So what you can do now is you can set up this digital certificate or a private key that basically your bank provides, and then that basically the it's an FTP connection that is automatically authenticated each time, even if they require 2FA. So I think that's a pretty cool update. So this one, to me, I think this is probably the coolest thing that's coming up, and I know that Gerry and Ali probably know about this as well. I'm just going to go over it from a high level. So the Item 360 dashboard. So this dashboard provides a real-time and concise overview of an item's current status. The SuiteApp lets you view all current transactional data that is impacting the item, along with related alerts that help you make informed decisions. So it drills down to item transaction details from the following focus pages, and I'll show you a couple of screenshots here. So there's an item overview page, an inventory page, purchasing page, manufacturing, and sales page. So here's a screenshot of the Item 360 dashboard. So this is per item. So when you would first come into this Item 360 dashboard, you would, let me get my little pointer here. You would put in this area right here, you'd put in what item that you want to be looking at. You can also filter by subsidiary or location. Then we have this section over here, we have this inventory section. So it'll show all of your different inventory locations. It'll show you what's on hand. This is a demo account, so there's not much data to show here. The next one is this purchasing tab over here on the left, and this gives you a couple of different sections that you can look at. So you can look at planned reorder item purchases, three-way matching, open quote requests, open purchase contracts, open requisitions. So it kind of gives you an overall view of everything that's happening on the item. And then your sales as well. So this will show if there's any open sales orders for this item, they'll all show here. Quotes, return authorizations, or open opportunities. So this will give you a pretty good overview of an item. You can really dig into what's happening with that item. And I think it's a great tool to use. And I think in the chat window, we confirmed that pretty much all of the 360 dashboards and functionality require One World accounts. And so that's a requirement to be able to get this. But to install this, you can go to the SuiteApps page in your NetSuite account and just search for Item 360 dashboard, and it'll pop up, and you should be able to install it automatically without any extra charges, as long as you're in a One World account.
Corey,
Yes.
this is Gerry again. To supplement that a little bit, and I do have it available if anyone wants to see it, but it also brings up kit sales. So there's an analytics section under that sales that shows kits. And then it has also, in the latest version, return material authorizations, as well as quality inspections across the supply chain. So various subsidiaries and locations.
Great, thanks, Gerry. I think that this might be a fun topic to talk about during our inventory presentation later this year. Maybe kind of dig into this a little bit more. Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, next one is Ship Central. So Ship Central is now available in accounts that use warehouse management or advanced inventory management. On your kiosk or tablet device, Ship Central provides packing and shipping capabilities that enable you to do the following. And I'll just note, I think this used to be called PackStation, and it's been renamed to Ship Central, and then a bunch of functionality added to it. So I'm pretty excited about this. I think that this has been kind of a pain point in NetSuite for some time of having a little bit more of a robust shipping capability. And so with the warehouse management and advanced inventory management, things that have been included in this, and then all of the improvements that have been happening, I think it's definitely more of a complete solution these days. So I'm not going to read through all of these, but basically you can connect to this company called ShipEngine, and ShipEngine is a tool that can do, I think it'll do rate shopping, and it gives you the ability to kind of find the best rates for whatever you're shipping. So NetSuite connects to ShipEngine, which is a third-party provider, and get you a lot of extra functionality there. So access real-time rates, re-rate shipments, things like that. So anyway, Ship Central now available if you use warehouse management or advanced inventory management. Oh, gotta find my pointer here. Okay. And my last update for today is that filters are now available in the analytics portlet. So this is if you're using Suite Analytics workbooks to create any charts or pivot tables or any of that information, and then you use that in a dashboard portlet, you can now filter in the dashboard portlets. Before, you'd have to go back to the workbook and to the chart or the pivot table and then do your filter there and then refresh your portlet. But now you can modify those filters directly in the dashboard portlets. So I think I mentioned this coming January next year, we're going to have a Suite Analytics workbook presentation. So I'm sure we'll talk about how to use that information in portlets as well. So those are my updates for today. Thank you all for sticking around and listening to me and learning a little bit more about 2023.1. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And at this point, Mike, if you wouldn't mind kind of taking over and facilitating our open forum, we'll do that for the remainder of the time.
Yep, no problem. So I think at this point, it's open forum. So if anybody on the call has additional questions, doesn't have to be about projects. It can be just about, things you're hacking through in NetSuite. This is the time to ask everybody and see if you can get some answers so you can move forward. So does anybody have any questions? Feel free to open your mic and ask, or to post on the chat, and then I can